Retro.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and whenever I'm in this part of the galaxy, I listen to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Makes flying a little more tolerable. Don't tell Anakin.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we are starting this week, as we do every week lately, with a discussion of the next episode in the Clone Wars rewatch series. Before we get into that, Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are, please?
Absolutely. So we are super easy to find. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right. The dish is aligned. The signal is boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy, and I've been really excited to talk about this episode of the Clone Wars, which is called the Zillo Beast. It is episode 18 from season 2. It's kind of a classic episode. Jay, you want to go ahead and kick us off with the summary of the episode, please?
Yes, an instant classic it was at the time, too. The clone army and Jedi unleash a new superweapon on Malastere in order to defeat the droid armies of the Separatist Alliance there before the planet can fall and deprive the Republic of badly needed fuel for their war effort. Although the weapon successfully wipes out the droids, it revives a long-thought extinct creature known as the Zillo Beast. Awakened, the Zillo Beast begins to rampage against the clone army and the Dugs native to Malastere. Duty-bound to protect a unique life form, Jedi Master Mace Windu refuses to allow the Dug to kill the Zillo Beast, and with some help from Anakin Skywalker, formulates a plan to subdue the creature. Once their plan is in action, they successfully knock out the Zillo Beast before it can rampage across Malastere and disrupt the burgeoning alliance with the Republic.
All right. So this is our Kaiju/Godzilla homage episode of the Clone Wars. What did you think about this one overall, Jay?
Oh my gosh. Well, as you said in the beginning, and I echoed that, this was an instant classic. And I think for a lot of great reasons. I mean, you've got this idea of this beast that has been, as we just said in the opening, been awakened. And it is something that is impervious to lightsabers. What? And now they have to figure out a way to defeat this, and it's all hands on deck, and it's just causing havoc everywhere. And then you have Mace and Anakin working together to try and figure out how they're going to work around this and still get the Dugs to join the Republic. So, I mean, there's just so much going on here, and there's a lot of ethical questions that are involved, and also just the overall colossus scale of the Zillo Beast, and there's so many callbacks, as we'll talk about, to things like Godzilla and the old different kinds of movies from not just Japan but all beast movies in general that always capture our attention, not only in Star Wars but in other ways, shapes, and forms as well. But what were your overall thoughts?
Yeah, the more I think about this episode, the more it's obvious about how much of that Godzilla feel, especially the original Godzilla, they were really trying to capture here. And then there's just a few other homages to other Star Wars things that are front as well. But let's go ahead and start with the beginning of this episode. And it kind of sets up something that's a little bit important, which is that, this war, it just can't be fought indefinitely here. Both sides need resources, and the Republic is facing this crisis of a fuel shortage. And so they are looking to forge this alliance with Malastere. It's not explicitly said, but they're acting like Malastere is not in the Republic here. Yet we remember from the Phantom Menace, once Chancellor Valorum has received the vote of no confidence, and they're getting ready to vote for a new chancellor, one of the candidates is from Malastere. So Okay, it's supposed to be in the Republic, so I'm not entirely sure how this all works. And if it is they got representation in the Senate, but their resources are something that has to be negotiated, or what the situation is. Ultimately, not a big point, but it just kind of highlights the fact that when it comes to this prequel era, there are a lot of machinations in the background that aren't always clear on the surface, but we don't necessarily have to dive in those details. And frankly, George Lucas doesn't want you to. It's
Right.
just take this at face value. It's important. This needs to be done. This alliance needs to be honored. But have any thoughts on that?
Well, I hadn't thought about the fact that you're absolutely right that there were some representations of Doug's in the Senate in the Phantom Menace. And I think to your point that you nailed it when you said that there's probably some sort of gray area there where they can be represented and have a voice, but until maybe they are fully part of the Republic in terms of the way that their commerce or their government or leadership or whatever is kind of given over in this treaty, that they're not considered a full member of the Republic. But again, as you said, does it really matter that much? Probably not.
No, and I guess the other angle to look at is like, look, if Naboo, which is clearly part of the Republic, can accuse the Trade Federation of blockading the planet and invading it, and the Republic doesn't immediately sit up and take notice, then it's conceivable that Malastere could have its resources that it doesn't immediately just have to turn over to the Republic because the Republic asks. And there
Mhm.
could be some sort of negotiation that happens. I mean, the Trade Federation is part of the Republic, and it blockades Naboo over a trade dispute. So just
Mhm.
because they're all part of the equivalent would be the federal government doesn't mean that, hey, they just have to fork everything over. But we belabored that point, so we'll move on here. The fight with the droid army was interesting because we essentially get the reverse situation of the Lerman and the Defoliator from season one,
Right.
in
Mhm.
that Defenders of Peace episode that we had. In that episode, you had the Trade Federation, Lock Durd, who was in charge of that, testing the Defoliator, which would destroy all organic life forms, but not affect droids. And in this situation, we've got this, what is it they call it? The electroproton bomb, and it only impacts droids and electronics, but does not otherwise affect living organisms. And that's exactly what they do. They drop this bomb, and it explodes, but then it sends out this type of impulse that knocks out all the droids and powers down the Republic ATTEs and other vehicles, even causes Anakin's artificial arm to short circuit there.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that was cool.
yeah, and they just like really didn't even bring any attention to the fact that this was the reverse of the separatist idea of, with the defoliator there.
No, I love that analogy, and you're absolutely right. And what I thought was really interesting too with this, I thought of number one, it's like a big droid popper. But number two, I thought, okay, some of these droid or not droids, sorry, clones, you could see that they sort of grabbed their helmets and were like, and I thought, well,
Uh-huh.
at first maybe it was their HUD display, but I wonder if those particular clones, if their chip, their Order 66 chip, was being affected in any way.
Possibly, except for the chip is like kind of represented to be like an organic type of a chip in their head. I
Mhm.
don't know. I mean, anything is possible there. I like that thought. But the other thing about the bomb is that this episode is a Godzilla homage. And well, what was the origin of Godzilla? Well, some of the stories is that he is the product of nuclear testing in the
Mhm.
Pacific. And so the dropping of the bombs were what led to the mutations that created Godzilla. And so now here we have this gigantic bomb being dropped, creates the sinkhole in the crater that revives this ancient beast. The other stories, Godzilla is an ancient beast that's always been around there. So
Mhm.
again, another neat parallel. I mean, it's fun. We skipped over this on this rewatch the last episode, which is the Bounty Hunters episode, which is kind of a retelling of the Seven Samurai, and now we get a retelling of Godzilla. Of course, my intention was to rebroadcast that episode we did, Bounty Hunter, as part of our Hondo Naka series. We'll see if I actually got around to doing it. But now I'm thinking about it, I'll make an extra effort. So this is kind of the Japanese cinema homage era for the Clone Wars.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been so much, as we know, and as our listeners know, and anyone that's been a fan of Star Wars knows that there's so many homages that are paid to different types of films like this, whether it be Kurosawa or in this case Godzilla. And obviously that's where the Zillo Beast gets its
Yeah.
name. You know, Zilla, Zillo, and kaiju is a beast. So there you go.
Right. So let's talk about the Zillo Beast itself. What do you think about this monster?
What is so like how do I want to say it? It's frightening. You know, there's this horror aspect to it because you don't know, especially at first, you don't know what it's capable of. But then when it does start to wreak havoc, it just completely just decimates everything. And you feel for these clones, and you have these huge transports that it's just picking up and basically using as symbols almost, you know,
Yeah.
like there's two of them that I was just waiting for him to smash together like symbols, but he didn't. And just the loss of life and the destruction. But yet the Dugs were like, oh yeah, you've awakened this, but we know how to deal with it. And we're just so over the top confident in the way that they were going to like take care of this thing until it came up out of the hole. And then it was like, uh-oh, it's go time at this point.
Yeah, I'm going to address that in a second. I just want to talk about the Zillo Beast itself a little bit more first, which is, I really like the design. That it is this, it's kind of a more eel-like or snake-like compared to Godzilla is, but it still has that type of a head that makes the inspiration, which is Godzilla, unmistakable for it.
Mhm.
And then instead of having the, just a simple, paired limbs, arm and leg, and two, paired arms, paired legs, it's got like three. It's got trios of limbs there.
Yeah.
And instead of having like the claws, it's got those toes that are almost flap-like there. And so even with the fact that it's got this impervious hide, just like Godzilla does, that they couldn't destroy Godzilla with conventional weapons, they still they do that here with this, but they go so far as to say it's impervious to lightsaber. And Dave Filoni was talking a bit about that in the special feature for this episode, which is that they try to be careful about not making too many things impervious to lightsabers because that really defeats the whole point of a lightsaber.
Right.
But George let them get away with that for this one here. But yeah, I liked what you had to say about it. The rampage here. It was such a classic kaiju type of a thing. It's awakened, it's angry. It doesn't actually have anything against the clones themselves, other than the fact that they awakened it and they're in the
Mhm.
way. They're committing violence against it, and it's a creature. It's trying to survive. And then it's really the Dugs that antagonize it. But addressing your point about the Dugs, they're almost like gleeful about destroying this creature here. They've
Yeah.
got their plans, and anytime the Jedi or the come around, they like, they roll it up and pull it off the table real quick there. And they, yeah, it's hard to judge societies. They are on this planet of Malastere, and the Zillo Beasts were threatening them, so they wiped them out. A little less sympathetic when you kind of discover that the Dugs came to Malastere and then wiped out the Zillo Beasts so that they could mine the planet for its resources there. But yeah, they were like, oh, we know how to get rid of these. We're just basically, you can't shoot it. So we're going to drown it in toxic fuel, which
Yeah.
is a really horrific way to go.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And and to your point too about the Zillo Beast itself and the way that they awakened this through this blast and then the sinkhole. It made me wonder, is this the only Zillo Beast that is in existence in all of the galaxy on Malastere? Or are there other places in the galaxy where they've just not been awakened yet? That's
Yeah, I mean,
wild.
we're led to believe through the narrative of this story that this is the last one, that the Zillo
Mhm.
Beasts were thought to be extinct in the galaxy, and that this is the last one. And that's part of why Mace Windu is so adamant that it not be killed, that he
Mhm.
feels duty bound as a Jedi, and and having a duty to the Force to not let them just wantonly kill this unique creature. And we don't want to spoil the next episode, but we're assuming most people have watched the Clone Wars and they know that's exactly what happens after it gets to
Right.
Coruscant. Instead of being a Godzilla homage, it turns into a King Kong homage in that case, only for them to bring it back in the Bad Batch here.
Yeah.
And they give us hints that will be the case at the end of that next episode. So spoilers for our next episode covering the Clone Wars. But at any rate, I think it works best for the story if this is a unique creature that is long thought gone nowhere else in the galaxy, because nobody had any idea what it was except for the Dugs. When this thing emerges, the Jedi are like, what is this? And it's that lead Dug whose name is Doge Naka. It's like a Zillo Beast, and he's talking about it was this ancient thing that used to threaten them and terrorize them when they first came to this planet and started mining it for the fuel there. So yeah, there's that. Speaking of which, what did you think about that guy, Daj Naka, the Dug that was in this episode?
Oh, he was not a nice guy at all.
Yeah.
I didn't, and as Dave Filoni was saying in the featurette, we've never seen a nice Doug. There's
Nope.
Sebulba, and then there's this guy, and we just never see a nice Doug ever. So I guess it's just part of who they are is a society, and maybe that's just their way. But yeah, as you said, they were gleeful about this whole thing, and they were also very overconfident in a lot of the things. But I mean, eventually they did get their comeuppance in a lot of ways, and they decided, all right, well, maybe we do need to join the Republic and mind our manners a little bit too. But yeah, he was not nice.
Yeah.
Not nice.
One thing about Doge here and the other Dugs was just like this. They're actually very clever creature design, and
Oh
sure,
yeah.
we're not the first time we've seen them. Obviously the first time it was in the Phantom Menace, and then of course they appear throughout Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith in the background. But just how much we saw of the Dug here, and the way that they walk on their arms and then use their hind legs as their feet, as their
Mhm.
hands, rather
Mhm.
here. It was so hard to get used to
Yes.
watching that here. I kept getting disoriented by that. I was like, why is it moving like that? I was like, oh yeah, it's what would normally be their arms is how they support themselves. They stand upright and they keep using their feet. And even then, it's like with Sebulba, he rears back to hit Jar Jar, but still almost uses like one of the arms that should be a leg to do it. In this case, they're making gestures with what we would think of as their feet in this case. And it just kept throwing me off when I was watching this. It was almost disorienting to watch in that regard.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's probably one of the reasons why you don't see very many people doing cosplay of Dugs.
Yeah, it'd be really hard.
Because, yeah.
So when the Zillo Beast first emerges and no one knows what it is, Mace Windu has sent other clones into the sinkhole to look for some of the clones that had been pulled into it when the ground collapsed there. And Mace and some clones are walking across the territory, and that's when the Zillo Beast first emerges. Well, then Anakin springs into action with R2D2 in his fighter, only for the Zillo Beast to swat it down. And that's when we learn that it's impervious to lightsabers, because Anakin's lightsaber has no impact on it, and he ends up running up its back, and then ultimately escapes from it by catching a ride on R2D2 with his boosters. As much as this is a homage to Godzilla and Kaiju there, I just really dug Anakin's action in this episode as well. Doug, no pun intended. But I realized what I said is after it came out. But at any rate, and it was like Anakin is the one that ended up proposing the solution, which to his credit was not, yeah, let's poison it, or let's kill it. He supported Mace's idea of figuring out a way to subdue it, to knock it out here.
Oh, yeah, and to his credit, he was a little bit phased at first that, when he was trying to get to the Zillo Beast and use his lightsaber, he was like, "Wait, what?" When it wouldn't go through, but yet he very quickly adapted to that, and I think a lot of that goes back to the fact that Anakin is very much in tune to animals and the way that they are. I mean, that goes even back to, things like being brought up on Tatooine and in the Attack of the Clones, even in the arena. So I think that that was to his credit that he was able to adapt so well and, join Mace's thoughts that, yeah, we need to preserve this. We need to figure out how we can save this thing, not kill it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I gotta say, Mace gets periodic focus throughout the Clone Wars, and this was a good episode for him here. I mean,
Mhm.
uh, he was a leader. He led from the front. He demonstrated this commitment to the Force, because so often he comes off as one of two things, which is callous towards Ahsoka and her interests and or a non-interest in being part of the Jedi, or two, it's just like, yeah, there's this threat. We got to go deal with it. I'm the baddest guy in the galaxy with a lightsaber. Let's bring violence
Right.
and such here. But he actually gets an opportunity to be thoughtful in this case, and to this point of when this episode really aired, that wasn't what we were, and for years after, including more scenes of the Clone Wars, we didn't always get that. So I really did appreciate the way that they gave him that opportunity to be a Jedi in this episode.
I agree. And the fact that we are also reviewing Revenge of the Sith in our little segments for the anniversary this year, and we've talked a lot about the relationship between Mace and Anakin. And, just the fact that Mace has said things like, I don't trust him. And you get this real sense in Revenge of the Sith, which is obviously later chronologically than what's going on here, that there's a very different type of tone and a very different type of relationship than what they have here. I mean, you could see that Mace truly respects Anakin as an equal and that they actually make a pretty good team in this
Yeah,
episode.
and this isn't the last time we'll see that either.
Right.
Because they're going to have that again. Now that you bring it up, I really think the downfall of any relationship that Mace and Anakin had is Chancellor Palpatine. And there
Yes.
is a simmering tension between those two in this episode when, because Palpatine appears via holo transmission a couple times, and when the electro proton bomb goes off, it interferes with the transmission. They get him back later, but he's back, and when he's told about the Zillo Beast, like, oh, what a fascinating creature. It's like, but yeah, let's kill it and get on with getting our fuel. And he can't
Mhm.
understand why this is a big deal, and he is almost condescending towards Mace, like, all right, well, we'll try his plan since it's his conscience that's so bothered by, this is me adding all the sarcasm, but it's that he's the one that's so bothered by us doing what we need to do so we can defend this war. It's like, I think he says it's like it's of no consequence to what we need and what we
Yeah.
want here, and it's just that simmering resentment under the surface from Mace over this. Like, do you hear what the words coming out of your mouth? And
Mhm.
it almost reminds me a bit of, like, by the time we get to Revenge of the Sith, after Palpatine's been rescued and they meet on that platform outside the Senate offices, where it's like this mock, this like fake, like, thank God you're okay, Chancellor, from Mace Windu. It's like, and then the Chancellor's like, yes, thanks to the heroic efforts of your Jedi Knights. And it's like, nothing to do with you, Mace. It's just but there's resentment between these two. They have different ideas of how to run this war, how to conduct things in the galaxy. And we see an early example of this right here in this episode.
Yeah, and I think that's very perceptive of you in that this is laying down those initial seeds of, as you said, Mace just not liking Palpatine, and just not trusting him. And so then eventually later on, when Anakin does become so close to him, it's just very much under his skin. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I love that you pointed that out.
Isn't it kind of funny, though, that now that we're having this conversation, Mace's instincts are not to trust the Chancellor. And then later in Revenge of the Sith, when it's clear that the Chancellor's gotten under Anakin's skin, it's not to trust Anakin. Yet everyone gets so upset with him over his treatment of Ahsoka. And it really comes down to like one main line when it
Yeah,
with
it
Mace
really.
Windu and Ahsoka, when she's not coming back to the Jedi, she's going to be a citizen, and then he start kind of, I don't want to say sarcastically, but he just citizen. He puts that emphasis, that disrespectful emphasis on the word there.
Right, right. Yeah, no, it's so true. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mace is definitely one of those that gets a bad rap sometimes.
I'm an apologist for him. I mean, it's I think he's unfairly maligned when it comes down to everything. Was it not the Jedi way to attempt to kill Palpatine and Revenge of the Sith? Perhaps not. But who is Anakin to criticize when he beheaded Dooku at the beginning of the movie? So, I mean,
Right.
he knew that wasn't the Jedi way here, and yet somehow Anakin's judgment is what we're all going with in this instance. So,
Right. Right. So true.
boy, you can see, I told you, I'm an apologist for Mace Windu. I'm getting worked up over this. So, yeah, but the episode ends with Palpatine agreeing that they should do something with the Zillo Beast. And Mace's idea is that they're going to relocate it to another planet. Palpatine agrees. They're going to bring it back to Coruscant first for further studying.
Yeah,
And
great idea. Bring it to a huge metropolis where it could potentially wreak havoc there.
yeah, and Mace isn't so confident that Coruscant will survive all of this here. Before we wrap up the episode, there was just some fun trivia that there was from the featurette on StarWars.com and in the little trivia section that they had on the episode guide for this, which was that the two clones that were featured, Goji and Rod. Goji had a stylized Godzilla on his helmet, and then Rod had an image of Rodan, which is another kaiju
Mhm.
from the Godzilla universe
Yep,
there.
yep. That's
And then
so
the lead tactical droid had a symbol on its chest that resembles the oxygen destroyer that was used to kill Godzilla in the first Godzilla movie. That just cracks me up that was their, destroy the oxygen around Godzilla so he'll die. But yeah, they make no bones about it. This is such an obvious homage to Godzilla and kaiju type things, and it works so well.
Oh, yeah, and I love the fact that Dave Filoni just has so much fun with it and throwing these little, Easter eggs and symbolic gestures and things like that into it that, it's just yeah, it's unmistakable that he loves his job. Kind
Indeed,
of
yeah, and it did so well, so very well.
yeah.
All right. Well, any other final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Well, just a couple really quick ones. I mean, just the fact that they did this is just perfect example, with Dr. Bowl. Just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean that you should.
Right.
And, it was kind of the best of intentions, but, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is great." And then until it wasn't. And, these huge types of weapons like this that they're attempting to try out for the first time on these types of planets probably isn't the best idea to do. But then the other ones too that I wanted to point out really quickly was just the fact that, with Palpatine, as you said, he was all about killing the Zillo Beast until Dr. Bull points out that the hide, has value because it could be used for ships and it could be used for armor and it could be used for all of these different kinds of things. And then all of a sudden Palpatine is just salivating over it.
Right.
But do we ever find out exactly what the hide of the Zillo Beast is made from? Because I know when they finally did clone it, there was, some, really celebratory kinds of things like, "Oh yes, this is here," and, in the Bad Batch and that type of thing. But do we ever know what it was made out of?
No, and I don't think we're ever intended to. I mean, it's not
Mhm.
doesn't act like Beskar quite ideally or Cortosis or any of those things that are lightsaber blast resistant, that type of thing. The other stuff that they were hurling at it didn't impact the Zillo Beast as well, but it could have been dragon scale for that matter. I don't know that it was ever part of their intended storytelling us to tell us that. It just to give in its own way, it's a plot device. That's why, like you just pointed out, oh, this is extremely invulnerable to lightsabers and the like. This could be of some value to us, so it's worth studying. And as much as that, you're right, that is what caught Palpatine's attention. But I also think it was the opportunity. He is a Sith, and part of the way that he has managed to consolidate power is to cause chaos in places. Well, where better than Coruscant in this
Mhm.
regard? Could have backfired if you're thinking about it, but
Yeah,
he did accomplish his goals.
it did indeed.
Anything else?
Oh, I think that's it. Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, then, that'll bring us to the end of our discussion of this episode of the Clone Wars here on Podcast Stardust. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you did, and you haven't done so already, we'd greatly appreciate it if you go ahead and subscribe to the show on your podcatcher of choice. And we would also be very appreciative of a rating and review on whatever podcatcher it is that you use, especially if that's Apple Podcasts. And if you want to catch more of our discussion of the Clone Wars, mainly the past discussions that we've done, if your podcatcher doesn't carry all those episodes, they're all available over on retrozap.com, as well as the entire catalog of 929 previous shows that we've done. And you can check out some other great episodes while you're there, or some other great podcasts while you're there, such as Agent Shield Case Files, Enjoy Stuff, Love, Death, and Robots, plus Superhero Suite. Well, I've got some active podcasts and episodes coming out as of lately. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody one more time what our social media contacts are and where else we can be found around the internet?
Absolutely. And you don't have to use a bomb to get to us. We are very conveniently found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And you can also check out all of our Pinterest boards as well as our two YouTube outlets. So we have the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and please share those out. And another thing that you can share is your love for Podcast Stardust by picking up one of 7 different show logo designs on something over at TeePublic. So the link to that is in our show notes, and you can grab yourself a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, coffee mug, all kinds of fun things for the home. And also, once again, if you do happen to get something, please take a picture and post it so we can find out where in the galaxy that ends up. And the link to that is in our show notes.
All right, coming on the show on Wednesday, we have the next installment of our Revenge of the Sith series, where we've been breaking down the movie into 10 to 15-minute segments and analyzing those. This is a fun one. We got a great guest, so make sure you stick around to check that out. And then on Friday, we are wrapping up the week, as we always do, with a look at some recent Star Wars news. With all that having been said, thanks for listening to episode 930 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and until next time, may the Force be with you.